friends. This is John, your host of Dairyland Frights. And make sure, wherever you listen to Dairyland Frights, to rate and subscribe us. Give us 5 stars. We truly appreciate it. And make sure you give us a review so we can see how we can improve the show, make it better, and stay spooky. Hello, my spooky friends. This is John, your host of the Paranormal podcast, Dairyland Frights, that covers everything spooky, creepy, and mysterious in the Midwest and beyond. And today, I am very blessed to have great guests on, and it continues with Paul. And Paul, I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your last name again?
Vicyet.
Vicyet. Great. So I am fascinated by Paul because he's had not only extremely interesting life in the military, and he's an author, and he's written some very, what I feel, intriguing books that I'm looking forward to putting on my reading list. So, Paul, if you could introduce yourself to my audience and talk a little bit about, I know you were born in Italy and you moved to Chicago suburbs, but if
Mhm.
you can kind of give a little background to my audience, that'd be great.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. And it's a clear day out there,
Yeah.
so there shouldn't be any problems with our connection. So, yeah, you're right. I was born in Italy, so I am a green card carrier, and got naturalized when I was 17 because the Italian army drafted me, and they wouldn't take me if I became a U.S. citizen. So I became a U.S. citizen, and sure enough, instead of going into the Italian army, I joined the United States Air Force after getting my degree in architecture because there was such a low level of employment for architects in Chicago at that time. It was like 27% unemployment for architects. And the government was giving out $12,000 signing bonuses. And in 81, $12,000 was a lot of money.
Oh,
So, but the other thing, of
yeah.
course, is that when we signed up, they took away the bonus. So that was a pretty interesting of them to do that.
That that that's the government for you.
That's the government for you
So one thing I was fascinated. So you worked for the United States Army Corps of Engineers.
right now. Yeah.
And one of the things I was, yeah, and one of the things I was really fascinating about it is, and we were talking offline a little bit before this and everything, was you had, to me, would be a extremely transcended experience that
Mhm.
kind of led you into a lot of things, right? So,
Right.
can you tell my audience that experience you had while you were in the military?
Sure. Yeah. When I was an officer in the Air Force, I was stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is the cradle of research and development in the Air Force. And I was assigned to Aeronautical Systems Division. And one of our clients is Foreign Technology Division. It's like a part of Aeronautical Systems Division. And the mission of Foreign Technology Division is to research and spy essentially on other countries and look at their weapon systems and looking at their strengths, their weaknesses, looking how we can take advantage of their weaknesses and look at how we can improve our defenses or offenses based on their strengths. So I was a construction manager for that part of my tour, and my my project was in that facility. Foreign Technology Division was in a renovated warehouse, about 250 by 250 square. It was in a metal building, no windows. And when you got there, you were surrounded by motion detectors. And even if you had a top secret clearance, you were escorted around because it was a need to know operation over there. Once I got into the building itself through the double doors, I noticed that there was no directory. There was all the doors had no names, no numbers on the doors. Everything was painted white. And my escort told me that individuals that were in one office did not know what was going on in the other office. And you could tell by the way that the doors were locked. So My project was on the second floor. They gutted the entire second floor of this facility for a massive computer system. And at that time in mid
Mhm.
80s, computers were much larger than they are now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my job was to ensure that there was no opportunity for the contractor to put a claim against the government for differing site conditions or anything that they didn't anticipate. And what that meant is I had to inspect the site and compare it with the drawings, which are called as-built drawings, which are technically the drawings that indicate the condition of the facility before construction. So going through the as-built drawings, I noticed that there was a sheet that indicated basement, and it was for the entire floor plan of the building. And I reasoned, wait a minute, this was a converted warehouse. Normally, warehouses don't have basements. You just add on more space. You don't make a more expensive basement. So I checked the outline of the basement and compared it to the outline of the first floor plan, and it matched. And so we had an authentic drawing here that showed a hidden basement. I thumbed through the drawing some more, and I see a drawing, a sheet that is labeled cryogenic chamber. It's a detailed floor plan of a cryogenic chamber that is approximately 70 by 90 feet. And
Mm.
that kind of threw me for a loop, because if it is
Yeah.
in this kind of secure facility in a basement that isn't supposed to be known, uh, and
Mm.
having access for people, then there's something really special going on over there, especially with the size, which is 70 by 90 feet, which is not just for petri dishes. We're talking for
Yeah.
large,
Right. Right.
large specimens. And interestingly enough, I wasn't shocked. I wasn't stressed out by having this information. I just
Mm.
filed it in the back of my mind, and I made sure my escort didn't
Sure.
see what I saw, and rolled the drawings back up just as I found them. And I kept that secret for 5 years after I left the service. So that was like the first thing that
Mm.
kind of put me in a place where I realized that there was a lot of information that we're not being told.
Yeah. And that so where did that lead you to after you got out of the military? It basically led you to find some spiritualism, some different meditation, some different healing. Like, what did that do for you?
So the next event that really put me on the path to what you're talking about occurred
Yeah.
when I was just sitting on the couch at home and channel surfing, and I came upon a show called Ancient Aliens, and I stopped because they were talking about the book of Ezekiel, and how the information in that book of Ezekiel actually was misinterpreted, and how it describes high technology and extraterrestrial contact. And I recalled that when I was in high school, I stumbled upon a interview on the radio with the same person that was talking, Eric Von Daniken, about Ezekiel. And so when I was watching that in 2009, it made me remember that part, and then it also jarred my memory about what I learned at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base at Foreign Technology Division. And I put those two things together, and I realized that I needed to be a little more investigative about what's going on, because I wasn't satisfied just leaving things alone. And from there on, I started to make contact with people that had information about, for instance, patents that were taken by the government for energy conservation, or saving energy, or even free energy, things that had to do with big pharma, things that had to do with even chemtrails, which interested me, and
Mhm.
just anything that had to do with corporate control. And what I realized when I was talking to people is that they also had stories to tell about their contact or their abduction, or that they had implants, but they opened up to me, but they also told me that they preferred to be secretive about it because they were being ostracized, they were being attacked as being insane by their family and or lying or just trying
Right.
to get attention. And what I did reasoning this and thinking about the people is I set up a support group on Facebook called Spirits and Healing. And through that, and we had as many as 300 people in that group, they they shared their stories, they opened up more, I learned a lot about it, and I started a blog called The Red Pill at the same time. And so I would document their chats and whatever they would post it, and I put that on the blog, and it got popular. And I also realized that these people, a lot of them would say that they got psychic abilities after being abducted or having this contact, and many of them also advocated being meditative and getting into meditation. So be, because of that, I started to meditate in 2009. And one of first of all the psychic people would tell me one by one, even though they didn't know each other, that I had a special role to play, but they wouldn't go beyond that. When I had contact with another woman who was psychic, but she turned out to be my spiritual mentor, she would go into a trance, and in that trance, she would act as a medium, and another race that calls themselves the Watchers would contact me through her. And they confirmed that I had special
Okay.
play, and they specified that I was going to be a counselor and informer. And that kind of put me in a place where, I realized that I had to keep doing this blog and doing, this information with my spiritual group. Now, what happened though
Yeah.
is that I lost my job on the outside because they changed
Mhm.
marketing schemes, and I was hired for military work, and the company decided to go away from military work. So I decided I need to get back with the government to get back my 13 years so I could apply for a pension, because all I needed was 7 years. And but
Right.
before I did that, I stopped the blog, and I left the spiritual group because I didn't want the government during
Mm.
their security search, to find out that I was involved in that kind of stuff, especially with the sensitive information that
Mhm.
was on the blog. So uh,
Right.
that's where things really started to happen, was after I got hired by the government again.
And at any point, Paul, were you frightened? Not only by, I mean, if the government wants you, they're gonna get you. I mean, it's that simple. But also, were you frightened too about, like, where's my life going? Is like, and I'm not trying to be smug about it, but like, were you frightened like an alien ship was gonna land on your lawn and somebody was gonna come out and be like, "We told you, now we're ready. Are you coming?" How did you feel about either one, government and about aliens?
I the messages that I got from the Watchers was that I was being protected, and to and
Okay.
when I was getting the messages, I was also getting a feeling of security, of being at peace, and it was, almost a feeling of love that I was getting from these entities.
Oh, good.
So that assured me
Sure.
that, okay, I am going to fulfill this role one way or another. Regarding the government, I I wasn't concerned about the government because I wasn't doing anything that had to do with national security. It was other things,
Okay.
and it phased into spirituality instead of like military stuff. So I don't think the government was interested in our spiritual connections.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think that takes, and I wanna applaud you, takes a lot of strength and courage to do what you did. because a lot of people, let's be honest, would freak out, would let that consume their life, right? Looking over their shoulder, maybe, who knows? Maybe they see someone parked outside their house, and maybe it's just someone parked outside their house, right? But they think it's the government, and they go in that paranoia, and it spirals down. So, again, I applaud you for kind of like using other ways, not only to have your blog and your Facebook group, but to help other people too. Because I think that's a huge thing in today's world. Well, mental health obviously is a huge thing. A lot of things coming to the forefront, but when you're dealing with, and I've interviewed, people who have been abducted, their views are not so good of what you were getting. And that's a shame. And I've interviewed people who have had spirit guides like you had from the Watchers, helping you to understand it's about love, and you're protected rather than it's fear. Like every night you go to sleep, something's going to happen. And so I applaud you for that. So let me ask you this though. When how do you take spirituality
Mhm.
and the extraterrestrial life, and like how are they interconnected?
Okay. Well, first, I need to probably point out a couple of meditative experiences that
Yes, please.
actually, you know, actually put me on a path to write what I was experiencing. So before that, I wasn't even thinking
Great.
about writing a book. So
Yeah.
not long after, through a medium event with that woman, they told me that I was going to be tested in some way in meditation.
Mm.
And not long after that advisement, actually went through in meditation through a wormhole. And it was an amazing experience. It was, if you saw the film Contact with Jodie Foster, it
Mhm.
was the color, it was the motion, vibration, the heart racing, perspiration, all of that. And it was, I think it was in seconds. It felt longer than that, but I'm sure it wasn't very long. And once I understood what was going on, I was back in my body. So maybe I passed the test. I don't know. They haven't told me whether or not I passed the
Okay.
test. But
Yeah, sure.
um,
Yeah.
two years after that, and see, it's not like I try and make these things happen. They just happen to me. So 2 years after that, I was just sitting meditating, and a indigo cloud appeared to me. And with that cloud was
Mm.
a feeling of euphoria where, it's kind of like the euphoria that people that have had near death experiences say they have had, where everything is love and wonderful.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
as I got closer to the cloud in meditation, it dissipated. I noticed all along the horizon, it was like a beehive of activity, a structure where there were flashes of indigo. And
Mhm.
again, as I got closer, the euphoria got stronger. And what the message that I got, seeing these flashes all around me, was that each flash represented a spirit between lives, and the flash was uploading or downloading their life, downloading their last life or uploading their next life. And essentially, what they told me, what the message I got was that those spirits combined make up this one massive energy. And that massive energy
Mm.
and one consciousness is what everyone calls God. And that's when I was back in my body. So when I got that
Oh,
information,
yeah.
I reasoned people need to know about this. And I also
Yeah.
took information that I got from a researcher who passed away. His name was Robert Dean. He was a psychic spiritualist, and he was hired by the Army to be a contactee in telepathy with extraterrestrials to get information from them. And when you learn that the government had less than ethical reasons for doing what they're doing, he decided to go rogue And that's when he
Wow.
got his information from these extraterrestrials off the record about ourselves, that we are spiritually corrupt, and that the earth is important to them because it is the school where our spirits link to us, to the human body. The spirit, which is an energy, has the ability to learn about love, about pain, about suffering, beauty, creativity, all the human elements. They can't do that by themselves. They have to link to us to do that. And they're concerned because what started out the whole thing, really, their concern was when we dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, because they
Mm.
realized that we were like children playing with matches. We were not spiritually developed or ethically
Sure.
responsible to have that kind of technology. And what our scientists didn't realize is that when we exploded and detonated that kind of energy in that mass amount in a small time, it actually affected other dimensions. So that's why there was a spike in activity throughout the world, especially in places where we were dealing with nuclear technology, and still continues. So the information that we got was that we are spiritually corrupt because our DNA is flawed, and our DNA makes us violent, barbaric, have an irrational obsession with possessions, and where you can see a lot
Mm.
greed, for example, and worst of all, being racist to the point of being genocidal on our own, where we have mass murders in the millions, where we
Mhm.
kill our own species. And they're very concerned about that because we are a very intelligent race, but we are also spiritually corrupt, and our DNA is what the Bible says is our original sin. Our original sin is really our DNA, not what the Bible says. That's one thing that religion is hiding from us, is that the flaws are from us, not from what happened millions of years or thousands of years ago. So that's the link between the extraterrestrials and our spirituality. And, I wrote the disclosure paradox, and I labeled it the disclosure paradox because everyone wants disclosure. They think if we have disclosure that, we'll have free energy and we'll be like them, and we'll be able to be just like Star Trek and go from planet to planet and everything will be happy. That's not what's going to happen
Yeah.
because of what we are, essentially. If we were to have disclosure, our universal community understands that we would have contact. And then if we have contact, we would have a transfer of technology. And if we have that technological transfer, our less ethical and our greed would take over. We would take that technology, weaponize it, and use it against those that gave it to us. And they know that. So I'm pretty
Mm.
sure that our governments are slow on this disclosure and trying to delay it and delay it because they have been warned that if there is disclosure, there's going to be action, and then we're not going to like it. So that's a
Yeah.
paradox.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll get to the books, but I'm leading up to it so, everyone in the audience can kinda know what your path was to get there, that
Mhm.
it wasn't about you just woke up one morning and wrote a book. I mean, there's a lot going into this. But can we back up, Paul, here for a second?
Yeah.
Can you explain indigo meditation? Is that something people can learn to do, or is that just something that people have the gift and that's what it is?
I think meditation, you get what you need. You get what your role is
Mhm.
based on. You can't control what you're meditating because you open up yourself. And, I know that there's guided meditation, and you can probably, have, ask your guides or your spirit to guide you through a process. But as far as getting information like that, it it depends on the person, if the person needs to know.
Mhm. Right, right. Now, one of the things you too, kind of backing up here too, you talked about a little about like, with karma and meditation. Like, what have you discovered about that? How does that play a role in our life? Dealing with our spiritual connection, whether to ourselves, as a society, as humans, and also to extraterrestrials. Because, like you were talking about, there's a connection there, or we're trying to establish a connection. Whether we'll get there is another story, I guess.
So you're asking about karma?
Yeah, like how do you feel that plays a role in today's society,
All right.
and, how does that maybe affect our relationship with aliens or
All right.
extraterrestrials?
First of all, ev- everyone has a spirit, and the spirit takes on a role. Back where I mentioned that indigo activity going on, that's where the spirit takes on the role long before they link up with a human. And in order to link with the human has to have a functional brain. So my, my hypothesis is that, for example, a fetus doesn't have a functional brain, so it doesn't have that spirit yet. And the the Hebrews have said that the spirit links to the human at first breath. So that's another thing to think about as far as like our spirituality and the link with the human body. The every spirit has like instructions based on what their past life is. In other words, there are lessons. What we are doing right now is living out our life, but it's very short compared to the rest of the universal community, which is why they call it a school.
Right.
And in the school, we are to learn our lessons based on what instructions our spirits have. And if, for example, the karmic law is when, for example, a person who, say, was a sexual predator and he passes on, the life that he will leave next will be a victim, because that is the lesson that that sexual predator must learn. Someone who is greedy will come back as someone born into poverty. Someone who is a bigot will come back as an LGBTQ person.
Mm.
That's how the karmic law works.
Yeah, yeah. So, that's interesting to me. Now, one of the biggest things too, you said we're still learning. Eventually, I'll use the generic word graduate, right? Let's
Exactly.
graduate, okay?
Mhm.
Eventually, aliens have to decide, or extraterrestrials have to decide, if they're gonna let us into their world, right?
Right.
It's kinda like, you go into, and I'll just use a basic example, when you get married, right? When you get married and everything, you kinda, before you get married, right, you're kinda, like, testing each other, like, "Oh, should I let that person into my world? Should I reveal all my secrets to that person? Is that person, can I trust them?" And I believe, right, at a level, there's a universal, I don't know, place where we could be invited to. Do you think that will ever happen? Or do you think we're far, far away from that ever happening?
We are what I term as a technological and social quarantine. We're not allowed to go beyond Earth. Our our astronauts, when they landed on the moon,
Mhm.
I believe that they saw something and they were warned about
Mhm.
being there, and which is why we haven't been there in such a long time. I,
Mm.
I think it's they don't want us, and they don't want us because we're flawed, and they're concerned that we will spread our disease
Mhm.
throughout the universe, or even conquer, like what we did with the Native Americans, or what we still continue to do with the blacks or the Aborigines. So, and even
Mhm.
the people of the Amazon, they see that. Yes, we are intelligent, but we need to be more than intelligent. We need to be spiritual. And right now, our level of spirituality is very low compared to our technology. And we need to raise our level of spirituality to the level of technology like they are, because they've been are able to exist because they are balanced that way. They're not necessarily more intelligent than us. They've just been able to develop longer. We're talking 100 times longer than we have been in existence, maybe even 1,000 times longer than we have been in existence. So they've been allowed to, you know, to advance their technology that way. If a race has that balance, then there's a greater propensity for them to survive. We, however, have a bad imbalance. And so when we have such a low level of spirituality and a high level of technology, there's a greater propensity of us to self-eradicate. Conversely, when a race has higher spirituality and lower technology, there's a chance for them to be assimilated by a more advanced race. So it's very important both ways to have that balance.
Yeah. So, two things I think are really interesting about this. And one is back in the supposedly, whether you believe it or not, that's totally up to you, but Eisenhower, if you remember back in the 50s, supposedly signed a deal with the Greys to give technology to us from them to, in return, to take an experiment on humans. Any
That's not
feeling
what happened.
towards that? Okay. And why do you say that?
So what happened was that, yes, first of all, there were two efforts. The first effort was to have a meeting at Hulbert Field, Florida, and that was with probably it's a benevolent race. Their condition was, however, for this meeting is that we were to eliminate our atomic energy program. Obviously, Eisenhower thought that that was a Russian plot because the Russians obviously were, advanced in their nuclear program, and so he decided not to meet those beings. Another group contacted them and said, "Hey, we'd like to meet, but we don't have any conditions." So there was a meeting at Muroc Field, which later became Edwards. Actually, there's also talk that it was at Holloman Air Force Base. But
Mhm.
what happened was that Eisenhower was there with members of our military corporations, Grumman, Northrop, Rockwell, all those guys, Lockheed, and Bell Labs, and the Archdiocese of Los Angeles was also represented there.
Mhm.
When he learned that the Greys were asking for permission to abduct humans and livestock, but say that there would be no harm done, Eisenhower did not want to make that decision, that agreement, so he left. But what happened, the mistake was that he left, but the other guys stayed. And those were the military industrial complex guys that Eisenhower warned us about when he left office. They made the deal with the
Right.
Greys. They didn't care about the welfare of the public. They just were concerned about the technology and getting the money out of it. So they said, so the Greys recognized them as the leaders of, of our country. And they made the agreement. And that's where we have been. The military industrial complex has been getting this stuff, and not our governments, not a more benevolent exchange of technology. And by the way, they've been giving us technology that really hasn't been as I guess important, or giving us a breakthrough. They've been giving us stuff in piecemeal, but they've been allowed to do
Mhm.
what they've been doing. That's when they came up with the Dulce underground base, the joint reptilian and mercenary base that I write
Mhm.
about.
Yeah, and I did a episode on that, and that is totally fascinating to me because they have different levels supposedly on this base. One is called the nightmare level, supposedly. People who have been whistleblowers on it have said they're alien human hybrids, that there was a gentleman who wrote a book about it, said there was a war and he was injured in the war that was underground. And all that stuff from a certain point of view is true. There is a base, and you go near there, there's gonna be a problem. Area 51, that's the most famous one, as we all know, and, a lot of these places that we don't know, but one thing before we get to your books, because obviously I wanna talk about that. Um,
Sure.
there are parts around the world you're talking about Eric Van Dankian's book, Chariots of the Gods. In that book, he lists a number of different places, the pyramids, places in South America, Europe, so on and so forth.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, what what the biggest one that people would recognize here in the United States is the Skinwalker Ranch. That
Mm.
has been by numerous scientists, UFOologists, you name it. We can go on and on about it. Why do you think that specific place, and I know it has to do with Native Americans and so on and so I totally get that. But why do you think that place is one of the main focus points for extraterrestrial activity, I guess, is the lack of a better word?
I don't know. I haven't read as much about it as I should. I know that there have been many stories from many witnesses, and strange things happen over there. And I know it's gone
Yeah.
through 2 or 3 exchanges of possession from
Yeah.
ownership, right?
Yes.
It's it you know, there have been many hypotheses. One is that it's like on a point on the geo nodes system, that is critical
Mhm.
to the
Yep.
the way that the planet is works. So that's one thing. It's like an energy point or energy center, I suppose.
Right.
Um, yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah,
And
you're right.
that's really interesting to me. Go ahead.
No, you're right.
Go ahead.
It's something to certainly investigate, and it's obvious that something's going on over there. How much our black programs know about that, I don't know. It could be just something that is strictly extraterrestrial and doesn't involve human interaction.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've watched a lot of documentaries on it, read a lot of books on it, and it just can it keeps confounding everyone. Like, there's nobody that can be like a definitive answer. And
Right.
again, what I tell everyone listening to this is something that is scientists have gone out there and have tried to run different things with, from the geography of it, topography of it, looking at minerals, looking at, testing the air, the water, the everything. And they don't have an answer. They're like,
Right.
why does this keep happening? So before we get to talk about your books and everything,
Hmm.
do you think the military industrious complex, which I know that I pretty much know the answer to this, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Will
Sure.
they Do you think they'll ever just come out and just be transparent about it? Like, yes, there's alien hybrids, and yes, we've been using this technology. Do you think that will ever happen?
I I don't think so. Um,
Yeah, I don't think so either. Yeah.
the
Right? And
they're
for many reasons, right? Yeah,
well,
for
they
many
have the
reasons.
advantage. They're not going to give
Oh,
away
true.
that leverage, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and everybody's fighting over the technology, and
Right.
that's what makes us primitive, right? That makes us not monsters, but maybe to certain alien races, extraterrestrial races. It's like kids fighting over a toy, right? I have 2 kids. when they were younger, they're fighting over a toy, and you would be like, all right, no one gets the toy. And that's what I'm afraid of, Paul. I'm afraid that they're going to step in and be like, and the toy is a symbol of many, many things, right? And that nobody gets it now. That's what I used to do as a father. All right, you can argue over the toy. Nobody gets the toy. I'm taking it. And, I don't know what that means, right? What is that? What does that mean to you? That aliens could come in here or extraterrestrials, however you want to put, and just say, all right, we're taking it back. It's ours now, and you're not getting anything anymore until you find whatever we need you to find.
I think there,
Spiritualism, style, intelligence, whatever.
I think a lot has to happen for that to occur.
Yeah.
They they
Okay.
want to keep the Earth as the school. Obviously, the lessons are getting more difficult as time goes on.
Mhm.
And even with technology has nothing to do with the the benefits or our quality of life. Really, it really, in fact, it's making it worse, and it's making it riskier, such as AI,
Mm.
right? But
Yeah.
to them, the planet is more important than the humans. They could replace the humans, but they can't replace the planet.
Mm.
So they are monitoring the way that we treat the planet. I know that they have stopped nuclear attacks and launches, either accidental or intentional.
Mm.
One key
Okay.
event was at Malmstrom Air Force Base in 1967, where they shut down
Mm.
silo by silo, one by one, and the captain over there, Robert Sala, he's written a lot of books about it. Um,
Yeah.
and they've been to Rendlesham Forest, where
Oh, right.
we had nukes that were stored there, even though it was a top secret. That even the British were not supposed to know that we had nukes there.
Mm.
But they knew that we had nukes there, and they were going from silo to not silo to silo, from bunker to bunker, monitoring the, I guess, the technical health of the storage of the facilities to make sure that there was no possible nuclear accident. So they're still doing that. They're still, monitoring us. And I believe that one thing that is in the equation that is monitoring us, that has to do with, the custodian of the earth, are the Bigfoot creatures, the Yeti,
Mm.
Bigfoot, and others. I think they serve as sentinels to monitor the wilderness.
No, that's interesting. Yeah, and I've heard a lot of stories where Bigfoot has been or a cryptid has been seen near a UFO or a UAP or whatever you want to call them.
Exactly.
And a lot of people talking about how can all these Bigfoots be around at different locations and talking about using portals and stuff. And I agree. I think and I don't wanna go off on a tangent, but one of the biggest things is I hope they never catch a Bigfoot or Bigfoots, and the reason why is because they would dissect them, they would torture them,
Right.
they would hurt them, and I'm like, "No." I mean, leave them alone because I feel they're doing something for us, and if we're attacking them now, it may me that's a whole different podcast, a whole different story, but so let's get to you yeah, let's get to your book, The Disclosure Paradox. I wanna start with first thing, though. Before you started writing this book, Paul, did you ever feel like you were in danger? Did you ever feel scared, like, "Maybe I shouldn't do this?"
No. And, after that meditation and having more communication with the watchers, it just came to me that, okay, you need to take that information that you got from your blog, to take the information, use the people that you have as characters, use the person that is your meditative and your spiritual mentor, and
Mhm.
fictionalize all of them, and make up your story to give the public the truth about ourselves, why we are here, and our relationship with the rest of the universe, and why we haven't had disclosure. So what I did, I I sat down for a weekend. I was on a business trip, and one weekend I took a pen and notebook out, and I wrote 31 pages of outline straight
Huh.
in one
Wow.
weekend. That that doesn't normally happen to a first time
No.
author. And
No.
so I'm pretty sure that someone helped me out on that.
Mm.
And I did not stray from that outline at all when I put together the book. So that's how that book came out.
Yeah. So, why did you choose to write w- this book instead of maybe doing a nonfiction book? Right? And doing
Yeah,
something where you're talking about your real life experience because that is wow, that's a life shattering
yeah.
experience and kind of one of the things which you went through. So what when you were writing that, do you feel that there also was maybe, I don't know, your mentor or spirits, or whatever you want to say, kind of saying, no, write the book this way, like you're talking about, like somebody was helping you or something was helping you.
There are many reasons why I wrote it as fiction. The first is that I'm not well known. I don't have a following. I don't have a
Mhm.
podcast. I don't appear on Ancient Aliens. And, you know, a lot of people that write nonfiction have been doing it for a long time. They have had profound experiences, and and they continue to write about that experience, and they have a following, and they're well known. Richard Dolan, for example, Nick Pope, all those guys, Von Daniken. I can't compete with that. So,
Sure.
but the other thing is that the people that I wanted to read the book, people that I wanted to understand what is going on, the truth behind our spirituality and the extraterrestrials, they normally would not read a nonfiction book because it's not in their interest. They kind of get turned off by someone talking about their abduction, or someone, talking about how the tall whites are doing this and the Pleiadians are doing this and Arcturians are doing that. And it, if I did that, it would turn those people off. So I wanted to attract those people. And to do that, I wrote it in fiction, making sure that I had a lot of truths in there so that when they read the book, they would start to understand that this sounds kind of real, and that they would actually go in and research for themselves about what I was writing about.
Sure.
The other thing is that as a military person, if you write nonfiction, you have to go through a formal review process where they review your manuscript so that there's no sensitive information in there, and that there is
Mhm.
nothing that would be cause a harm to national security. So I obviously avoided that by writing fiction.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, and you don't have to give anything away, but one of the biggest thing about writers is you write what you know,
Hmm.
meaning, personal experiences, which we just talked about, obviously. But was there any real people in here? Was there anyone that you were like, change the name, but there was a Bill Smith? You know what I'm saying? There was a guy who did, whatever it is in the book. Did you do anything like that, or did you try to shy away from that?
Most of the characters are based on real people. Some of the characters are a
Okay.
combination of one or two people or three people. The main character is based on myself, and a
Oh,
lot of the
nice.
people that know that they are fictionalized are aware of it, because I did talk to them to make sure that they were okay with what I was writing about. In fact, one of them was is a woman who is a big supporter of me, and she actually allowed me to fictionalize her life story, and that became a
Oh,
prequel to
nice.
that book. So, and she's very well known in uh, sci circles,
Uh-huh.
psychokinetic circles. She's very well known in
Okay.
there. There
Yeah.
is a senior officer who I have made the character. I call him the Divine Warrior. And before I wrote the book, he met me for dinner because he was interested in, I was sending him the coordinates of the anomalies in Antarctica that showed that there were, some things there that didn't belong. And so he was interested in that. And so we met for dinner. And before we sat down, I said, wait a minute, before we sit down, you need to know that we are in the middle of, and has always been in the middle of a spiritual war, and that you have an important role in it. And I didn't intend to say that, but it came out, you know,
Sure. Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
that was one of my tasks in my role as counselor informer, because when I said that, he turned all red, started to tear in his eyes, and he just opened up
Mm,
to me about all the spiritual things that were happening to him. Visitations
mm,
by Mary, getting Gabriel's sword, being given a vision of himself on Armageddon, all kinds of things,
mm,
and how he was told by his mother that they're special, and his mother is psychic and he's psychic, and that he has been attacked by archons, and he's been able to repel them, all kinds of things. And I put his story
yeah, yeah, yeah.
in that book after I learned about it. I made sure I included it in there, but I passed it on to him to make sure that he was okay with it, and he was. So, and then there's another one in there that is what I call the lonely emissary, where he actually sent me
Mm,
the star charts that he comes up with after having his dreams and meditations. He's a hybrid, so he gets these star charts and he writes down things, and he also uses alien language in writing things down. And he sent me
mm.
the original documents, and I put them in that book as an example, and he let me do that. So there's a lot of authenticity in this book.
Oh, yeah. I love that. Now, one of the other things is when you're an author and when you're writing, it's hard to stay motivated, right? And, you can stop anytime, let's be honest, right? Do you feel that you had to get this book out to not only get it out to help people, but maybe just to get it out to get a message out? Well, like, what was the main purpose you think for writing this book that kept you going so you could be like, "Hey, I finished it. It's out there, and I hope, whatever happens, happens."
I thought it was part of my role to be a counselor and informer. And so I needed to fulfill that role because
Mm,
my spirit made that decision, as I write in the book, about a regressive therapy that I had with a psychic who informed me that the spirit
mm,
made an agreement to return to Earth and fulfill this role instead of advancing to the next level.
mm. Yeah. That's great. And that's something, again, whatever you're doing in life, you need some type of motivation. So, let me ask you this, you're the Disclosure Paradox Salvation Book 2 that is out, is that correct?
It'll be out in October.
In October. Great.
Yeah.
And can you give me a brief for my audience here, kind of a brief summary of what that book is gonna be about?
Yeah. Let me explain something. We are
Yeah.
we are here because of that book, not because of the first book.
Mm.
Because the first book I
Oh.
self-published, and the second book I self-published, which was the prequel to that second book. When I did that, there wasn't much success, and I thought, well, maybe I wasn't meant to be a writer. So I figured that there was something else that I needed to do. But in the meantime, I got a a message from a former Benedictine monk, priest. And what happened was that he, searching for extraterrestrials and spirituality found my first book. He liked it, and he friended me. And then he said, what's missing from this book?
Oh,
He said, is the Shroud of Turin. And I thought, well, okay. But what happened was that he sent me about 300 research papers from all over the world from scientists about the Shroud, authenticating it on its botany, art history, archaeology, even geology, hematology, blood science, all of that, forensics. And I thought, wow, this is pretty interesting. And I thought this could be a good sequel. So I put together an outline, sent it to him. He liked it. 6 months later, I made a manuscript, sent it to him, and he liked it to the point where he actually wrote the foreword for that sequel.
oh, nice.
Now, that was the book. I decided to go through the same process of trying to find an agent and a publisher. In the process, I found an editor who is a very good writer. In fact, one of his books is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because he's a memoir
Oh,
writer. And he
oh, nice.
liked the story, and he helped me edit it. And then he passed it on to his publisher, and his publisher liked it. And then when they found out that I had 2 other books in the series, they asked for them. They liked them. And so what we did is we reworked the first one. And so the first one was originally self-published in 2019. We published it February of this year, 2025. And the one that got everyone's attention will be out in October, and that is about a conspiracy to steal the Shroud of Turin. And it starts with a murder in the Vatican. And what that does is there's an entire chapter about the Shroud that authenticates it. And as I mentioned, it talks about, it's like a Reader's Digest version of all those papers that I read.
Okay.
And so the Benedictine priest, who, by the way, has been researching the Shroud for over 40 years and is the president of the Shroud
Hmm.
Research and Education Association, he
Uh-huh.
liked it, and that's why he wrote the foreword. And if you read some things about the Shroud, you realize that scientists have indicated that his blood does not match any human type, and that his DNA is different from our human DNA. So
Mm-hmm.
what I reasoned while I was reading all this stuff, something came to me, and I thought, there's a reason why I did research about the Bible, about blood in the Bible, and I found that there were 376 verses in the Bible that talks about the blood of Christ. And I thought, wow, there's
Hmm.
something that's going on over there. It's not a coincidence where they talk about that all the time. And then Jesus cryptically said that his blood will wash away the sins of the earth. And then
Hmm.
I got my message that I got was, well, what if we were to have the technology to harvest his DNA, take it, and then repair our own DNA so that it's not flawed anymore,
Mm.
and we could be like him.
Interesting. Yeah. Right.
So that's what that
Yeah.
book's about.
I love that. I love that. That definitely have to read that one. And then I don't know if this is true on your website, but you have another book coming out, hopefully, called "What Doesn't Kill Her."
That's the prequel.
Would that be coming out?
That's the
Oh,
prequel,
that's
and
the
that will be
prequel.
around
All right.
June 2026. Yeah.
Yeah, it's summer 2026. And I love that. Again, it sounds like an amazing book. Now, what should people take away from your books when they read it? Is there anything you wanna kind of get across to the readers
A
that
lot
they
a
take
lot of
take
things.
from them?
A lot of things. First of all,
Okay.
everyone has a role to play on this planet. Some are larger than others, some are bigger than others, some are more important than others, but everyone has a role to play. Each and every one of us are impacted by others more than we have an impact on our own lives. In other words, other people can influence our life more than we can. So that's why it's important for us to treat others in the way that we would like to be treated. The other thing is that there is fate to a degree because everyone follows a path, but it's not a straight path. It goes like this, right? And if you plot the straight line and intersect it with that meandering line, the points of intersection are the key points in your life that put you on that straight path. Okay.
Mm.
That's the other thing.
Yeah.
The one other thing is that if we want to improve ourselves spiritually, we need to know that we are here to make life better for others instead of making life better for ourselves at the expense of others. If you just follow that rule, we can leap
Yeah.
in spirituality in this world. And another thing is that if we really want to be like them, like the universal community, we have to release ourselves of the lust for power and the,
Mm.
I guess, adornment of wealth. Where power, they have released themselves of power and of currency. It doesn't exist in that life anymore. They've been able to get around that by just, by just being good to each other.
Yeah. I love that. That's amazing, Paul. And people have to understand again, it's not about you, it's about others, it's about your community. That's how we're going to survive, okay?
Right.
And it's going to take time, but when we both understand that, and I'm sure my audience understands it, but as we wrap up here,
Uh-huh.
one of the things you're talking about is I'm gathering you're hopeful about humanity, but I love a quote that you said. This is a great quote. We have a greater impact on others than we have on ourselves.
Mhm.
That is an amazing quote. And you kind of talked a little bit about that, but like what does that mean, to people? Like, again, that we have a greater impact on others than we do ourselves.
I mean, others have a greater impact on us than we have on ourselves. Yeah, because
Yes, yeah.
something's happening right now far away from you. You don't even know the person, but they're doing something that is impacting you because it will impact someone else, and then that person will
Mm,
impact somebody else, and it'll go down the line until finally it does impact you some way or other.
yeah, 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 and it's to the simple if you're looking at the simple generic version of it is pay it forward.
Right.
We need to do more of that. So last question. You've been amazing. Thank you so much, Paul, for taking time out of your schedule to be on my podcast. I love everything your experiences, and it's just like I said, being a very meaningful podcast for me, and I hope my audience. But I always ask this: the people who are on my podcast who are dealing with aliens, extraterrestrials, and things of that nature. What do you think aliens want and what's their end game? And I don't mean to say that in a negative way, but there has to be something that eventually they want. And we kind of talked about a little bit, but if you could kind of sum it up for my audience, that would be great.
Right.
Right. Mm, yeah. Mhm. Right. Mm. Yeah. 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 I love that. So, again, thank you so much, Paul. All the links will be out there. Go to Paul's website at disclosureparadox.com. Please get his books, support him. Independent authors are the lifeblood, I feel, to not only helping everyone else, getting the word out about different subjects like this and making them understand, again, it takes a community and we can't be selfish and we have to be out there to learn and educate ourselves and not take it personally when, maybe we're not getting to the places we don't want to get to. We eventually will if we all work together. So thank you, Paul. I really appreciate it. Like I said, when the episode comes out, all the links will be on to all your social media so people can check you out. And I would love to have you back on the podcast sometime because I didn't get to half the things I wanted to get to. I would love that. Please, I would love that. I will be in touch. Thank you, Paul. You have a great day. And, I always tell all my audiences and my guests, stay spooky. See you, Paul. Have a great one. Bye.